Hmm? Ah! Oh.
Why is it that I've come face to face with vampires, demons, the most hideous creatures hell ever spit out, and I'm still afraid of a little bully like Jack O'Toole?
Because unlike all those other creatures that you've come face to face with, Jack actually noticed you were there.
Why am I surprised by how comforting you're not?
It must be really hard when all your friends have, like, superpowers. Slayer, werewolf, witches, vampires, and you're like this little nothing. You must feel like Jimmy Olsen.
I was just talking to... Hey, mind your own business.
Ooh, I struck a nerve. The boy that had no cool.
I happen to be an integral part of that group. I happen to have a lot to offer.
Oh, please.
I do.
Integral part of the group? Xander, you're the useless part of the group. You're the Zeppo. Cool. Look it up. It's something that a subliterate that's repeated 12th grade 3 times has, and you don't. There was no part of that wasn't fun.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Still Slaying, a Buffyverse podcast. I'm Penny.
And I'm not Kara, I'm Jason.
And I'm Steve.
Also not Kara.
Not
Kara
Kara
couldn't
either.
be with us today. She had some unfortunate car situation that needed to be dealt with, but we are very lucky that we have Steve and Jason to try to fill her shoes. Good luck with that, guys.
Impossible. Not gonna try.
This episode, we're going to be discussing one of the very few Xander-centric episodes of the series, Season 3, Episode 13, The Zeppo, directed by James Whitmore Jr. and written by Dan Weber. The original air date for this one was January 26, 1999.
This episode had an audience of 4.1 million households for its original airing, down from 4.6 million for the last episode, Helpless.
The alternative titles in other languages for this episode were quite varied and entertaining. Useless, that was the Armenian and Russian ones. Outsider was Czech. Devil Loose, I don't know, in Finnish.
Yeah, that makes
That's
no
weird.
sense.
Night of the Living Corpses, that's German. The Day of the Apocalypse, yeah, I can see that.
It's very literal.
Cool. Yeah, Cool Dude is the Polish one. A Nobody is Portuguese, and Lack of Character in Latin America.
See, I think Devil Loose and is along the same lines as the Day of the Apocalypse. They were focusing more on that story, but I commend the ones who focused in on the loserness of Xander, because I think that's the core of the episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly the point of the episode. I guess
Yeah.
the Zeppo doesn't really translate into other
No, yeah.
countries.
I
It
guess
barely
not.
Yeah.
works in the US anymore. You know, I don't
Right.
think that people younger than any of the three of us would know who the Zeppo is or
Yeah,
I
the
barely
Three
know, but I-
Stooges.
Is
yeah,
are the three
Marx
Stooges?
Brothers.
Marx Brothers.
Marx.
Not
Oh, wasn't
Stooges?
Marx? Oh,
No,
oh,
it's
you're
Harpo.
right.
See,
Zeppo
I don't
Marx,
even
because It was
know.
Zeppo. It was
Groucho
Zeppo Marx.
Marx, yeah,
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And
See,
the
I
Zeppo
don't
was
even
just
know.
the extra one. So yeah.
Well, I'm really glad to have Steve back on the podcast and Jason back on the podcast. Jason was on last week to talk about Heathers. Steve, you were on before when we did, what was the episode?
What was it?
It was earlier this season.
That's horrible that I can't remember. It wasn't Revelations, because I had wanted to be on Revelations.
Right, Kelly was on Revelations. You were on Amends. Were you on Amends?
Amends. No, I
Yeah.
wasn't on Amends. I was away for Amends.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well. Anyway, Steve was on earlier.
I was.
And has left many excellent voicemails that we've included. And
Cool.
Jason hasn't really ever watched Buffy, so this is an experiment. And before we get into it, Jason, just generally, how did it go for you to watch it?
I did watch some. I think I at one point thought, all right, I'm gonna really get into Buffy, and I watched like the first 3 or 4 episodes and then just trailed off. You know,
'Cause season 1
And-
is weak.
Yeah, I know when you guys said that, I'm like, okay, maybe that's what happened. I mean, I don't think I disliked it, but I just wasn't getting hooked in, if I remember right. And there's a thing with me where my expectations going into something really impact how I receive it in a way that I wish was less, like when I'm really looking forward to something, I have to make a conscious effort to ratchet my expectations down just so I won't go in hoping for too much. And sometimes when I don't expect much and something's not all that great, I still like it more. So it's dumb, really. I don't like that I'm like that. But anyway, it's kind of like that with this series. It's been called one of the best shows ever on TV. And I feel like if coming in with all of that in my head, that it can't measure up. And so watching the show, I'm like, yeah, it's a fun show about kids fighting demons, but I don't really get the fervor. So then watching it a second time this episode, I think I was starting to get it, but I'm going to tell you what I think is really the draw of the show, and see if you guys who are fans, if I'm off base or not. And I think a lot of the appreciation for the show is about seeing it as a show about teenage life and the struggles that younger people go through. I think
Hmm.
that's a big part of it. And also the female empowerment thing, badass women, um, the funny quippy dialogue, of course, and just the exciting battles and romance and the seasonal arcs I've heard, but I feel like it's a show you need to watch a bunch and get hooked into before you really start to feel it, like you really get into the characters and all of
Yeah.
that. So
You
for me,
fall in
this
love with them.
episode, yeah, and I don't know them right now. And so I have just sort of a little bit of insight into the characters, which I'll talk about later. But for me, what really hooked me in on the second watch was just relating to it from remembering what it's like to be a teenager and have some similar issues that Xander's going through. And I thought that part was what hooked me in the most.
Yeah. He's
Yeah,
very
and
relatable.
looking at it from a and one of the things that I've tried to remember is, and you've mentioned this on the podcast before, Penny, you and Kara do, that if you look at it through a 90s lens, it makes it almost easier to take some of the things. I hate to say it like that, but I think if we there's some things that don't, it's I said it still holds up today, but you really have to watch it from that 90s perspective, I think.
It helps a
That's one of the
lot.
things I loved about it, by the way, is like just that intro is so 90s.
Mhm.
And I loved the 90s. I had a great time in the 90s, and it really gave me that feel, and I very much enjoyed that aspect of
Well, now that we're talking about the 90s, why don't we take a little trip back there and
Oh, sound
see
effects.
what was going on when this aired? The number one song in the US was Baby One More Time by Britney Spears, and we all know that that went on to be an incredibly influential piece of music. And the number one song in the UK was Pretty Fly for a White Guy by The Offspring.
it.
And
Nice.
Kara and I had a number of text messages about how funny these lyrics are, and so I've just got a few of them here. So, first of all, there's a part in the song where they go, Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, cinco, seis. And that has been in my head now for like 5 days. And then the lyrics are, you know, it's kind of hard just to get along today. Our subject isn't cool, but he fakes it anyway. He may not have a clue and he may not have a style, but everything he lacks, well, he makes up in denial. And it just seems perfect for Xander.
For Xander, I
Yeah.
know. That's I'm sure he would listen to The Offspring.
Yeah, I recommend everybody listen to that song after you're done listening to this podcast. It's really catchy and fun and dancey, and I have added it to my like get psyched up playlist. Best-selling books at the time: A Man in Full by Tom Wolfe, The Greatest Generation by Tom Brokaw, and US box office again, Patch Adams, which was just not that good of a movie. Stepmom number 2 and The Prince of Egypt, which I never saw. I think that's one of the first movies where I was aware of the concept of whitewashing. Wasn't Jake
Wow.
Gyllenhaal cast as an Egyptian person?
This is so crazy because this happened in 1999. I guess it was January, because 1999 is one of the best years in cinema history. It
Yeah.
has Fight Club, American Beauty, just The Matrix. All if you
Yeah, The
look at the
Matrix.
movies that
Yeah.
came out that year, but I guess they hadn't come out yet.
Yeah, they probably came out in the fall, right, as Oscar bait. So this
Yeah,
is the
you'll
like
start seeing
January
that as you go
doldrums.
forward in the podcast. I'll look
Yeah, I
forward
hope
to it.
so.
Yeah. During the week, the episode aired of January 24th, 1999. Starting off with some lighter news, on January 25th, 1999, the iconic horror film The Blair Witch Project, another one, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. That movie scared the hell out of me. I know people are either in two camps. They're like, it scared me, or I got sick and I don't understand what the big deal is. Also on January 25th, 1999, vowing to clean up the worst corruption scandal in its 105-year history, the executive board of the International Olympic Committee called for the expulsion of 6 members accused of unethical behavior and recommended drastic changes in the way host cities are chosen for the Olympic Games.
Huh.
Yeah, that corruption's all gone now. No worries.
Yeah, they took care of it.
Also on January 25th, 1999, an earthquake hit the center of the main coffee producing region in Colombia, South America, killing around 300 and injuring 1,000. At the time, it was the most powerful quake to hit Colombia for 16 years. It measured 6.0 on the Richter scale, and aftershocks were felt as far away as the capital city, Bogota. On January 26th, 1999, President Clinton welcomed Pope John Paul II to America. Meanwhile, his attorneys presented a motion to dismiss in his ongoing Senate impeachment trial. Yeah, it was denied.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
I think I know you don't want to go on too many tangents with all these, but no president has ever been successfully impeached. Is that right? Or maybe one was a long time ago.
No, I think that's correct. I think
Maybe
they've never
Nixon
been
would
found
have, but he
guilty.
resigned.
They've never been found guilty.
Yeah.
I think they both, like, Clinton was found not guilty, or it was thrown. Or I don't remember.
He got
Well, it's
censured.
like the House impeached, but then the Senate has to ratify it or something. And
Okay,
Yeah.
both chambers never do.
Yeah, and I think there was one, like you said, Jason, like 100 years ago or something, that the same thing. He was either found not guilty or it didn't go through. So yeah.
This episode, like many Buffy episodes, had a bunch of pop culture references, and we have pulled them out for everybody's enjoyment. Steve, want to read that first one?
I do, because this is probably my favorite one, because both Xander and Cordelia compare Xander to Jimmy Olsen, the photographer for the Daily Planet, who often tags along with Lois Lane and Clark Kent in the Superman universe. And like Jimmy Olsen, Xander relates to being an unappreciated sidekick without any special powers. There are 2 references. The 2 references are Xander's, "But gee, Mr. White, if Clark and Lois get all the good stories, I'll never be a good reporter." I just love that line. I'm glad you put it in here, and which he acknowledges as a Jimmy Olsen joke. Cordelia's jibe is, "You must feel like Jimmy Olsen," is another reference to the photographer, to which Xander replies, or starts to, like, get into a conversation with her about, "Oh, I was just saying the same thing to Giles," and he stops himself and realizes,
like, she's just gonna tease you more.
Yeah. So yeah, I love the references, and I love that I got to say that line.
Awesome, Steve. Xander mentions the Michael Jackson song "Wanna Be Startin' Something," which was on the 1982 album Thriller. It's when Jack says something like, "You want to be starting something," and Xander replies, "What? Starting something like that Michael Jackson song, right? That was a lot of fun. Too high to get over. Yeah. Remember that fun song?" A great and typical Xander moment of the way that when he's nervous, like, words just tumble out of his mouth.
When Buffy realizes that the Sisterhood of
I think it's Jay.
celebrate victory in battle by eating their foes, she comments in disgust they couldn't just pour Gatorade on each other, referencing the tradition in athletic competitions to celebrate by pouring buckets of the beverage over the coach. That was a good line.
Which they can bet on that. Did you know there's, like, betting lines in Vegas about what color Gatorade is going to be used in the Super Bowl, or it used to be anyway. The Zeppo draws its title from one of the 4 Marx Brothers, a group of irreverent comedians who were huge stars during the 1930s. Herbert Zeppo Marx was the group's straight man, but the foil for much of his elder brother's I can't say that word. Anarchic humor. Hence, to be the Zeppo is to be the least important member of a group. I have to disagree for a moment, because I was in a Greek comedy in high school where I was the straight man, and
it's a critical role.
It's a hard part to play in a comedy. Also,
I think Zeppo actually left after a while, and it was just the 3 Marx Brothers.
Bob says, Walker, Texas Ranger, you been taping him?
I
Jack
love
assures
that.
Bob that he taped every episode during the 8 months that Bob was dead.
I like that.
There's a reboot of Walker, Texas Ranger starring
Yeah.
Jared Padalecki. I haven't watched it. Have either of you watched it?
I watched the first season. And I think part of the second. It's gone. It's like 4 or 5 seasons now, I think.
Yeah, I think it's
It was
doing
it was
well.
okay. It was okay. It was very different from the Chuck Norris Walker Texas Ranger. So
It would have to be. Nobody else can beat Chuck Norris, so don't even
it's
try.
true.
There's also Quantum Leap and Fantasy Island. Just
Mhm.
rebooting everything.
Quantum Leap is great.
Is it?
It really is.
Cool.
I really enjoy it.
Oh,
Gotta
good
watch
to
that.
know.
When Xander saw the bomb in the boiler room, he said, "Hello, Nasty," which was the name of the Beastie Boys' recently released album, of course.
I could see Xander. George Lucas's
Mhm.
Star Wars films are referenced numerous times in numerous ways in the Buffyverse. In this episode, a visual reference to Star Wars can be seen when Xander runs into the corridor and runs back out with one of the gang members and a couple of Hellmouth demons chasing him. This was intended to mirror Han Solo running into stormtroopers in the hallway in A New Hope. I never picked up on that.
I didn't either, and
That
it's so clear now that I see it.
it is. It's got to be a reference.
The bomb in the boiler room is a direct homage to Heathers, which we talked about on our last
Mm.
episode. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, check it out. We had a great time covering Heathers. It's such an
Yeah, that's
amazing
good.
movie. It holds up
I, I,
remarkably
I
well.
want to listen to it now because I now that I've heard so much talk about it, I want to rewatch Heather's and then listen to the podcast for sure.
I'll be interested to
Cool.
know what you think. So let's get into it. And Jason, why don't you start us off?
So, do we know why Jack's friends are dead?
No. Well,
No, I
one
don't
of
think
them
it's.
tells us that he got shot by a liquor store owner.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. So they said the jackals attacked them. Do we know
Yeah. No,
who that is? No?
it's never come up
Okay.
before or since.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was wondering why Jack waited until this moment to resurrect them, but then he said he had to wait until the stars aligned because they'd been gone for 8 months.
hmm
And then I
Yeah.
was like, well, why is Jack up and around? But he said, yeah, he had a drive by a few weeks ago. So then I'm like, well, how was Jack resurrected? And he says Grandpappy found his body and raised him. And he said, it's a rush, man. Do we know who Grandpappy is?
No, and that never bothered me before until this watch of the episode where I went, wait, who is this grandfather? And how come it never comes up again that there's just this random guy that can raise people from the dead in Sunnydale, like make zombies? And it never comes up again. But yeah, I think that's part
Yeah.
of the under the this being a Xander perspective episode. There's things in Xander's life that come up once and then they sometimes come up again and sometimes they don't. So I think that's part of the charm of the episode is that there's so many things that just
Like he has these things going on that we don't even know about and can't
yeah
really get a
Yeah.
peek into it.
I
Mhm.
think also
And also in,
Sunnydale just
yeah,
has
that's
like
what
a
I was gonna say.
backdrop of like magical people and stuff going on.
Demonic forces and
Mhm.
stuff like that, right? And now at this point, 3 seasons in, you're just like, yeah, that happens. Stuff like this
Yeah.
happens. We don't
Mhm.
need to know the details. Um, I Here's another question. I get the feeling that maybe they're making Xander seem especially fragile, where everyone's afraid for his safety and encouraging him to stay out of harm's way, maybe more than normal to accommodate this story. Because isn't he usually there fighting with people and they're not trying to push him out, or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although he doesn't have any powers or abilities
Yeah.
and there are other times when they're like, Xander, don't jump in.
Okay.
But he has magically garnered military knowledge, and sometimes that puts him right in the middle of things.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think it's really played up in this episode
Yeah,
more
because of the
so
theme,
than
right?
Yeah.
because of the theme. So it's definitely played up more in this episode. It's like the very beginning when he's like, "If anybody sees my spine, could you pick it up?" That kind of thing. So I think it's definitely played up more.
Cool. That's kind of what the sense I got, that there's a little bit of it, but it was played up more. At one point, Jack, the leader of this dead bros gang, calls Xander an R word, and later Xander, when the police officer comes to find out about the night fight, and he says, "No, we're just two guys wrestling, but not in a gay way." And I wondered if watching this, there's a lot of stuff that seems kind of cringy because they didn't know any better, you know?
Yeah. There are
Yeah,
definitely
for
dated
sure.
references. Yeah.
There are there's another Buffy podcast that I listen to where they have things that age like a human or age like a vampire,
Oh, that's
and
funny.
that would be one of
That's
the things that aged like a human that doesn't
didn't age well.
especially his response of I'm slow in some ways, spatial relationships, but not disabled or however he puts it. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's some definitely some dated references in it.
Right, and you got to expect that. I mean, you can't help but cringe, but it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, that was kind of the water they were swimming in, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all. Yeah, that's all the questions I really had for now.
All right. Maybe some
Okay.
more will come up as we talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Steve, where do you want to go?
Wow, there's so much in this episode that I love that I love the growth we see in Xander, and as much as I try to defend him, there are times when I can't really defend him, but I think this is one of the few episodes that we can look at and go, okay, we have particularly at the end when we see where he deals with Jack, and he just looks at Jack, and Jack is like, no, I'm already dead, and Xander's like, yeah, but this isn't like walking around having beers with your pals dead. This is like scraped up by the janitor, little bits dead, and I don't think you can handle that. And that really that moment of standing up to him, not in a physical way, but really in a mental kind of cerebral way, is a breakthrough for Xander. We don't see that a lot from him. We don't get a lot of that from him. So I was glad that we got it in this episode. Um,
Yeah.
we
Hmm.
do have a little bit of physical from him also, when he's wrestling with the guys in the car, and he takes the one guy's head off with the mailbox, and there's
By accident.
certain by accident, yeah, but we see we do see that he has the physical attributes, like Jason, like you said, that his weaknesses are played up more, but we get to see a little bit of that in this, and I like that we throughout the series we have Xander has these moments where, like, when he kills the vampire in the swimming episode with uh at the funeral parlor, and
Yeah.
he
With the
stakes
easel.
her from
Yeah.
behind, yeah, with the easel, and there's he has these moments of breakthrough, and then of course then he'll do something stupid or idiotic, and we'll just go, oh, Xander.
I think
So
that
yeah.
it teaches us that a lot about bravery and being able to fight is about your perspective and not necessarily about powers. We got that in Helpless, right? Buffy has her powers literally taken away from her, but she still manages to defeat this very scary villain. And in this episode, we see that at the beginning, Xander, when he doesn't have a clear purpose that he's fighting, he's a mess. But as soon as he has a goal, right? His goal to stop them from blowing up the school, he is a man of action, and he follows through, and he is brave. So it's a
Yeah.
good lesson on bravery, that it's not about power, right? Like early on,
Mhm.
Jack makes the point. He's like, it's not about who has the knife. Here, you take the knife.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's why Xander's character appeals to me so much. Not just the fact that I was a teenage boy, and Nicholas Brendan is playing a teenage boy, but when he's on mission, and I've said this before to other Zeds, when I get myself on mission, it's like I get super focused, and I get into that mindset of I have a mission to accomplish, and I'm gonna get it done. And I think that's what
Hmm.
Xander's the same way, but when he's in between missions, he doesn't know what to do with himself.
And
That's
I
true.
think this episode, like when he was talking to Jack, it's all about him trying to figure out what it means to be cool, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And Jack said something about it's about fear. What did he say?
Who has the least
Who
fear?
has the least fear? And I think in some way that's if you are trying to get people's approval, if you care what everyone else thinks, as most teenagers do to some degree or another, if you're trying to have the cool car or whatever just to for your image so you'll look cool, and you put too much focus on all of that. Xander, I mean, I really did identify with Xander in this episode because I felt like that as a kid a lot of the times. but I also felt like, God, you're so pathetic, you know. And I had both those things going on. But there is fear in that, because if you're worried about that, then you're afraid that people aren't going to see you the way that they want, or that you'll be seen. I mean, the way Cordelia just lays into him, useless, you're nothing, you know. It's like,
Oh yeah.
God, that's my
Yeah.
only experience of this character, and I do not like her. I'm sure there's probably more, but
Well,
she's
Xander
vicious.
Xander cheated on her, so
Oh,
he has it coming.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
it's
Well,
a
that
there's a
changes
whole
things a little, but
yeah,
Jesus Christ.
there's a whole story arc with the actress wanting to them getting she was going to be moving to a different show, and that's kind of a spoiler but not super spoilery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think where his shakiness, at least in this episode, comes in is in his relationships with other people, and also his relationship with the team. He wants to feel valued, but yeah, he's brave as hell because he just wants to help fight these demons. There's no hesitation in that part of him in any of this. It's more social fear than anything.
Yeah, he's
And
not afraid
then
of monsters. He's
no. And then at the
yeah.
end, with the moment with Jack, where it's about, okay, now who's more afraid because we're about
Mhm.
to die. And I felt like this was a little forced. Like, really, does Xander really not care if he's about to die here? I mean, the idea was that he would have less fear than Jack, so he could find his own personal power and not care what everybody thought as much, and that's how you be cool, is you just sort of rest in yourself and follow your own bliss and have a good time in life. And then when people respond to that, bring them along, and the ones who don't, forget them. That's been my philosophy when I finally figured out, you know, after many torturous years. And I think in the end he has a little bit of that, because also another thing is, don't talk so much because you're trying to get something with your speech. And he's claimed, he doesn't even tell the rest of the crew when they say, oh, it's lucky that you weren't here last night, you know. And he doesn't even say, I was here and I stopped some zombies or whatever. He's just like, okay, well, I just like to be in my quiet place, or whatever he said, because he doesn't need to prove anything anymore.
He
So that
proved it
was
to
how he,
himself in that
yeah. And
moment.
that's
Yeah,
what it's about. Being cool is just how you are with yourself, not
and
worrying about what other people think.
I think for me, what triggered it for me in this, particularly in this, watching it this time, is he looks at that bomb and he looks at Jack, and he just resigns himself to the fact that, okay, this is going to end, and it doesn't matter, um, because I can't stop this. But if I can convince this guy to stop it, then
I've
does that make
won.
sense?
But it was
Does that
almost
make
like a bluff, because not
Yeah.
only was he putting his own life at risk, but all his friends who he knew were in the building too.
But like
Yeah, no,
there was
You would be worried about that.
there was no option for him that was going to get them all out of there, right? So this was the
Yeah, I
only
guess so.
option he had, and
Yeah.
he just went. He leaned into
He
it,
went
right?
zen. Yeah.
He went
it's
whole hog.
I like what you said there, Jason, because I think I totally agree that it was a bluff moment, but it was and I used
A
to
centered bluff,
it was
kind
a
of.
centered bluff, but it was a bluff based on like I used to play poker, and I was terrible at bluffing. I couldn't do it. But I could do it when I had a hand. Like if I knew I had something like two pair, but I knew there was better options out there, then I could push and I would bluff, because I knew I kind of can win this, but I can't really win it unless they fold. And I think
Interesting.
that's
Feels
what
like a psychological, yeah. But if you know you have no chance of winning, then you can't.
yeah. So I'm not I like that thought that it was a bluff, but at the same time it was a calculated bluff, that he knew that he was I just
It was
that
his only
cerebral.
option.
Yeah, and that's that cerebral moment where he knew that he could out bluff Jack. Like
Yeah.
he knew that Jack. Well, I mean, the fact that Jack had been raised from the dead and enjoyed this running around, he knew that Jack didn't want to be dead, and he's like, "You can't get out of this room before that bomb goes off. I won't let you get out of this room. And even if you
I mean,
can get
for
out of
all
this room,
intents and purposes, Jack's not dead. He's able to party it up.
Yeah.
You
right,
know, so
right,
really it was about oblivion, not
right,
existing anymore.
yeah, exactly. He doesn't look dead. Like
Yeah.
the other zombies that got raised were
I mean,
down
even
for
them, they're having
months.
a blast, you know. They're
Yeah,
not dead. They're
Yeah.
just changed.
yeah.
One of the things I really like about this episode is that it has a different style than a lot of other Buffy episodes. It has like a lighter storytelling and structural style. in order to, take the focus away from this apocalypse that's going on, which is played very melodramatically. There's a lot of like high melodrama in the scenes where we
It
do
felt like a
see.
parody,
Yeah,
It's
the whole
it's
thing.
so good.
it was definitely heightened from what is the usual
Mhm.
Buffy style, and they made really good use of edit with dialogue. So I'm gonna play the first episode. I like the way the dialogue goes from one scene into the next, and this is related to the conversation we just had.
But it's just that it's bugging me. This cool thing. But I mean, what is it? How do you get it? Who doesn't have it? And who decides who doesn't have it? What is the essence of cool?
Not sure.
I mean, you yourself, Oz, are considered more or less cool. Why is that?
Am I?
Is it about the talking? You know, the way you tend to express yourself in short, non-committal phrases?
Could be.
No, you're in a band. That's like a business class ticket to cool with complimentary mojo after takeoff. I gotta learn an instrument. Is it hard to play guitar?
Not the way I play it.
Okay, but on the other hand, 8th grade, I'm taking the flugelhorn and getting 0 trim. So the whole instrument thing could be a mislead.
Trim, also dated.
King.
Yeah.
One thing nobody else has. What do I have?
An exciting new obsession, which I feel makes you very special.
Now with the mocking, which I can handle because I know I'm right about this. I'm on the track. Just need to find my thing.
It seems like you're overthinking it. I mean, you got some identity issues. It's not...
The end of the world?
Can they do that?
Nice transitions in this episode.
I love
Yeah,
that.
I love that exchange. I love that exchange between them and just the Oz of it. That he's such a great character, but he's like you and Kara were talking about last week. He's almost too perfect in
Yeah.
some ways. He's almost too Zen-like. But I just love the 2-word answers in that he gives so many questions that Xander has, and then obviously at the very end when he's like when they want to go get something to eat, he's like, "I'm oddly full today." Did you understand that, Jason? That he was the
Yeah.
werewolf? Okay,
That's
okay,
funny. Yeah.
Yeah, he ate Jack.
Yeah.
Which just underlines the coolness for Xander that Jack actually never does come back. Xander thinks he
Yeah.
just scared him away.
yeah.
We were just talking about why were we talking about Donald Logue before we started recording, and
Because of terriers and the guy who's in the
'Cause he was on
Nebraska episode of The Walking Dead.
Yeah, Michael Raymond James was on Walking Dead.
yeah. And anyway, Donald Logue had this movie called The Tao of Steve. It was one of his first, I think it was his first movie, and it was about him and how he was good with women, and his friend was jealous, and he tried to teach him his principles, which were be desireless, be excellent, and be gone. And I think it's not just about being good with women, but just being a cool person that people like gravitate to. And I think that first part, be desireless, is sort of like just don't talk so much because you're not trying, it's like don't try so hard, and that will make people trust you and gravitate you to you more because it feels like you don't have anything to prove. So I feel like that's kind of the lesson. A lot of these brooding guys like James Dean and Dylan from 90210, they don't say anything either.
There's a saying
Daryl
that
Dixon.
says, be silent and possibly be thought to be a fool. Speak and confirm the suspicion.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So there is something about being reserved and quiet, or a person of few words like Oz is, that people will fill in the blanks for you and possibly assume that you're deep and cool and have really interesting things going on inside your head.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always the
Mhm.
case. Sometimes you meet one of those people of few words and you get them to finally talk, and you're like, oh
Right.
no, it was better before.
It's
You
way
should
more
never not talk.
impressive with us podcasters that can talk a lot and still seem cool like
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true, I think.
You guys, we are all really, really cool.
That's true.
Well,
It's true.
It's kind of like, and this is going to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but it's kind of like when I first started doing the live Steves, I was just doing them because I couldn't, at the end of an episode of TV, I couldn't remember what I wanted to say, and I hadn't written anything down. So I was like, I'm just going to record my thoughts as I go. And people just liked it. And I'm just like, why do they like it? And it's just, I enjoy doing them. So,
I've
but it's
actually started doing that when I am taking notes to prep. I use the speech to text feature on my phone and I have a document open and I just occasionally like pick up my phone and say my thoughts and then I have notes at the end of it and then I organize from there. So you inspired me, Steve.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank
And
It
you,
really
and
know,
thank you
helps.
for that.
this is a total tangent, but maybe if people listen to like Walking Dead cast, they'll care. But I actually have encouraged other people not to do that and kept it as your domain, in part because you were first, but also you do it in a way that's really snappy and fun. And it kind of gives a little reminder for people of what happened in the episode. If everybody started calling in and doing that, then it would be really repetitive. But I like that you're the person that does that and you do it well.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Um,
Um, so getting back to Buffy the Zeppo,
yeah.
I love what you were talking about, the transitions between the scenes, and like when Xander, when we get that super melodramatic scene between Buffy and Angel,
Oh,
and
I have it.
you,
Do you want to hear it?
oh yes, because you realize we're seeing it from Xander's perspective,
Yeah.
how he sees their relationship.
Hey, they're not baking any cake.
Long gone. Probably loaded with supplies. Gotta think. I can't believe I had sex. Okay, bombs. Already dead guys with bombs. Oh man, I'm out of my league. Buffy will know what to do.
I don't know what to do.
Let me decide for you.
And then
I
Xander
love
walks
that.
into that melodramatic moment with Buffy and Angel, and he's like, "Oh, you guys seem busy. I'll go."
Yeah, yeah. I just, and that we haven't even talked about the whole Faith of it here when he meets up with Faith when she's being attacked by the Sisterhood of Jay. Did we decide how to say it?
Yeah,
Um,
Jay.
Mhm.
and she's like, "Oh, I'm all worked up after a fight," and then they have sex, and she just throws him out the door right away. And that we'll talk
That's
some
a
more about
kind
that
of
in spoilers.
controversial scene. There are
It's
people
rude.
like in the Buffyverse who are like, "I don't think we needed to have that." And I'm like, "I kind of think we did." I think first of all, losing your virginity, although I think virginity is a social construct, is a huge moment for any teenager. I think that the it tells us a lot about Faith. We already have heard her say that she doesn't treat men she has sex with as important, but now we've actually seen it and it was
Mhm.
hilarious. And I love subverting the trope of like, the guy will just have sex, like hit it and quit it, and then the girl will be all like mopey afterward. And the idea that Faith is like, I need a shower, bye, is sort of liberating for me as a woman. It's like, yeah, girls can like sex too. That's fine, and
I
also
don't like
not be
it.
emotional about it. You
See,
didn't like it?
there's this whole thing these days where the traditionally oppressed or marginalized in media are doing the thing to their oppressors that is typically depicted as being done to them or was done to them. And to me it just perpetuates injustice, but it's in a way that everyone roots for because it's the opposite. And I don't know, it's just really been getting to me more and more these days.
Oh, I don't
Especially
see
because
it as a big
I'm an old
injustice though.
man and I just hear a lot of how old white men suck, and it's starting to get to me, you know.
We are old
Like
white men.
if I was that kid, if I was Xander and that happened to me, I wouldn't want to ever talk to that woman again. I'd be like so upset by
Oh, that's funny because um I've been on both sides of that equation, and I
that.
don't find it offensive unless there are falsehoods that lead up to it, right? Like if the one person is like, "I love you, it's so
That's a good
special,"
point.
and then they're like, "Get out." That sucks.
Yes,
But
that's a
like
good point.
Faith didn't even that didn't
No,
seem
she's just
like
like, I am
romance.
horny.
Yeah.
Right.
And she's
Yeah,
like, "Don't
that's
worry, I'll
true.
do all the work. Like I got it. You just be
Yeah.
Yeah.
here."
Yeah.
That you just made me feel differently about it. That's a very good point. Thank you. I didn't realize that Xander, I wasn't sure if he was actually a virgin or not. He said, I can't believe I just had sex, but that doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean it was
Yeah,
for the
it's one of
first
those
time.
things that I think is again it was kind of controversial at the time because in this I don't want to get too much into spoilers, but when he and Cordelia were together, there were some lines that they say where it makes you think they might have had sex, But then when you get this scene, you go, okay, I guess he and Cordelia never actually did anything more than just make out.
But
So
I don't know.
it's
Just because you said I can't believe I just had sex doesn't mean it was for the first time.
Yeah, it isn't ever really completely clear. We do know
no, I think it is.
at one point that Faith is like, I got there first, but
Okay. So maybe yeah,
Xander, I
okay.
don't know if Xander ever confirms that that was his first, but
Hmm.
it's
I
It
canon.
seems
I
yeah,
I think it's I think it's later because there's a episode where the gang figure out that he and Faith had sex and Willow is just completely devastated by it because
Yeah.
they're such they've
Spoilers,
been such
spoilers. We're
yeah
heading to
yeah,
so
but
spoiler section.
we'll
Yep.
talk about it in the
he
spoiler section.
he
So
seems okay with it too. So
Yeah.
yeah,
there's
Yeah.
like he
that.
didn't seem upset at
He's
the
a
time.
little discombobulated, but okay,
Um,
whatever.
Yeah, he
Still
seemed
yeah,
a little
stoked.
surprised by the speed and the fact that
Yeah.
he didn't even get to put his clothes on before he left the motel room, but um he didn't seem insulted or anything. I
yeah,
think because Faith never pretended that it was anything else. And
Yeah. But I mean,
I
if you saw a
yeah.
scene like that with a guy who's like, "I'm horny, let's get it on. Okay, now get out of here," and push the girl out without her clothes on, it wouldn't be so cool.
no,
No,
even in the
it
90s,
wouldn't.
it wouldn't have been considered cool. Even in the 90s.
And you do see those scenes. There was a scene like that in the very first episode of Extraordinary. And because it's
Mhm.
extraordinary, the guy has the power of flight and he literally flies away from her.
I
Like
saw that.
she's speaking to
He's
him
a
and he just
dick.
like flies out the window and leaves.
Yeah, I love though that he gets back. So he gets back in the car and he sees what the guys were buying and realizes, oh, they're not making a cake, they're making a bomb. And so he follows this logic train. Like I said, suddenly he gets on mission, like we talked about a little bit ago, and he goes back to the hardware store and realizes, okay, they've already been here and left again. So now I've got to figure out where is this bomb at. And I just like that seeing that work of that logic train that he kind of gets on and he figures out, okay, they're going to blow up the school,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, he eventually
or
sees them and then we have the hilarious scene of him dragging the guy with the
right, trying to get information,
and then
and
he
that's
did in
right.
the mailbox beheading um and it's funny because later he also has a moment where he's like speechifying to one of the zombie guys and the guy runs away and he's like, I have to,
That
you know,
wasn't finished.
Yeah,
talk less, like talk less.
Yeah.
Because in both cases, like he didn't get to do what he wanted to do because he was too busy like grandstanding and talking
hmm
and that is a Xander problem is that he's a talker and sometimes it gets in the way of being a doer.
Hmm.
It does often mean he has the best funny lines on the show though. Like
Mhm.
Xander gets most of the comic relief that the dialogue has. I mean, they all get to be funny, but
Yeah, he kinda I yeah, I don't know. I think you're right. It's a lot about just wasting time, and so then he doesn't get to do the thing. But he kind of also yammers in a way that's funny, but it also takes away from his personal power
hmm
sometimes. He
yeah, it
reminded me
does.
of Chandler a little bit from Friends, his character.
Yeah,
yeah,
there is a similarity there in the sort of yammering and
Hmm.
nervous energy, and but he's like actually funny
Yeah,
and
for
he's
sure.
handsomer than he gets credit for. Like he's a
Yes.
really good looking
And he
guy.
had moments where he like even when he first encountered Jack and he pulled a knife on him and he just kind of got serious for a second. It was like, hey, chill out. It's like not I forget what he said, but there was some power there, it wasn't just like, oh my god, I'm scared.
Yeah.
right.
I mean, he is battle tested,
Yeah.
right? Like most teenagers are not. They have not been in the situations that he has been in. And I mean, there's no reason you would know this, Jason, but like he's even saved Buffy's life
A couple of
on
times,
several
yeah,
occasions,
several.
but like
Hmm.
really importantly at the end of season 1 she dies and he brings her back to
Hmm.
life. So he's not a completely useless
No,
member of the team even if he's usually just buying
and I
donuts.
could feel that even just from this episode. I thought I feel like this character has a history of doing brave things, and they're just kind of sidelining him here a little bit more than usual for the theme, like we said
Mhm.
earlier. It didn't
Yeah,
seem
for the
like he
sake
was
of
a
the
pathetic
story.
guy in that regard.
Yeah. Well, if you go back to and Penny, you mentioned amends earlier. If you go all the way back to that, there was three, and I was thinking about this week as I rewatched the Zeppo a couple of times. That leading up to the Zeppo, you have three very heavy episodes. You have Amends, which is
Yeah.
this huge angel episode that's very dark. Not It's dark. It's got some very dark moments in it, and then it ends with kind of a lighter note. And then you've got Gingerbread, which is super dark through a lot of it. And then at the very end, you get a few light moments with the Buffy stakes this big demon with this huge wooden stake that she's been tied to, and she stakes it through the neck, and she's like, "Did I get it? Did I get it?" And then you have Xander and Oz falling through the ceiling, and we're here to save you, you know. So you have these light moments, and then Helpless, the same.
Helpless is really dark.
Yeah, Helpless is so many messed up things in Helpless, and it ends on not really a comedy note, but a more lighter note between Buffy and Giles. And the only bad thing about this episode, or not bad thing, but the unfortunate thing for you, Jason, like we were talking about, the previously on, all you heard was "you're fired" to Giles, and you have no context for that. But
He's a watcher. I know that, right? He's
yeah,
kind of like the
he's a
Professor X.
watcher. Yeah, he's a watcher, and he's a librarian, and so he's still going to be a librarian, but he got fired from being a watcher.
But it seemed like he was still doing the same thing this episode.
Yeah, it
Yeah, he
doesn't.
refused to leave Buffy because he loves her
Yeah,
and wants to protect her and help her, even though the Watchers Council fired him. So he's in a sort of an odd predicament.
for a while. It's going to be several seasons, and we'll talk about that probably in spoilers a little bit later.
Yeah, we could talk in spoilers.
The whole "you're fired" again, that, as we're seeing this episode from Xander's perspective, that's really probably all he focuses on, is the fact that Giles got fired, and that's all that's really, everything else is just is background to him. So I like, again, this whole episode is a lot of Xander perspective on things, and so getting to see his train of thought, getting to see him running around being chased by these zombies, and then he and the zombies are being chased by the demons, is a whole big thing. And I just, it's this episode is definitely in my top 5 of the series. I don't know, it's so tough to rank.
Yeah, I haven't tried to rank all of my favorite episodes, but I love this one for the silliness, and I think the timing in the season being right in the middle is really great, because the first half of the season ended on such a heavy dark note, and then to sort of kick off the second half of the season with something lighter and fun it's a nice breath of fresh air before we dive into some more
Oh,
darkness that's
I
coming.
hadn't thought about it, because you and Kara brought that up, that kind of episode 7, episode 8 of every season, except for season 1, because it was only 6 episodes, but or 8 episodes, whatever season 1 was. That always the 7th, 8th episode is like a transitioning episode to where they get into the next half of the story, and we're going to see that as a pattern throughout the show's run.
Yeah.
And so that this is a good, like I said, you have these 3 very heavy episodes, and then you have this one that's kind of a palate cleanser before we're going to ramp up to the rest of the season. Because again, spoilers, I don't want to spoil the next episodes, the next few episodes. I haven't watched them yet, but
yeah, there's some
we're
heavy stuff coming.
Yeah.
I am a girl and was a teenage girl, so I
What?
don't. Yeah, I know. I don't know what the experience was like to be a teenage boy. So I'm glad that the two of you are here with me and can maybe speak to. And Jason, you've already said, and Steve has already said that you have ways that you identify with Xander, but like, how realistic, I guess that's a ridiculous question, but like, what are the ways that you relate to him and that you think he's a good representative of like teenage boy?
I think personally, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like I, more than most people, thought about what is it to be cool, or how do I like attract people to me, or how do I not say the wrong things. I think that's kind of common for teenagers, but I some people it seemed to just come more naturally too. And So I really identified with it in a way that was painful. I hate thinking about this, you know. Like I feel like at some point and I mean I'm always fascinated with human behavior. You know, if you listen to my podcast, you probably see the connection there. And I think it came at least in part from struggles with relating to people in school. And if you looked from the outside, it didn't look too much like I was struggling. I had great friends and I dated and everything, but it felt like a struggle on the inside. And so I really felt for him. Like that scene with Cordelia was really hard. Well, I don't know, it's really hard to
Yeah.
watch, but it seemed brutal. Knowing that he did that to her helps me not detest her. You know, it's like okay,
Yeah.
Yeah. She, to be fair
I
to your
Mhm.
first impression of her, she has always been sharp-tongued and known for her meanness.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite moments in the episode is when she says, "Ooh, again I struck a nerve. I am the surgeon of mean." And just her pride in her meanness is it's funny at this point in the series.
Mm.
Now, her character is gonna go through a lot of growth and already has gone through a lot of growth, but when she moves over to the Angel series, but she never loses that sharp wit, and I love it. I love her for it. I used to be kind of sharp-tongued and a little bit mean myself, and I have really grown out of it, but I always appreciate the way she is funny and mean at the same time. If you're just mean, nobody wants to put up
Yeah.
with you, but if you're funny when you're
I
mean,
mean, she said that no one notices him. Called him a wuss, nothing, useless. Of all the humiliations you've had, I witnessed, that was the latest. And then she
yeah.
walks off and says, there's no part of that wasn't fun. And I'm just like, wow, you are a despicable, evil person. And then she said he's the Zeppo, the useless part of the group, like Zeppo Marx. I'm guessing, I'm sure if I had seen her development up to this episode and their history, that I would feel differently about it. But just with that, with no context,
yeah.
it
Mhm.
was like, what? Where did that come from? What the
I can
hell
see
is
that.
wrong with you? He's going to kill himself.
I can see. Yeah, I can definitely see that with no context. For me, the Xander question, I'm I was very different than Xander in high school than he is. So I don't necessarily relate to him on that level. Because I was very I didn't date. I was very heavy set and not I don't think I was self-conscious, but I I didn't care about being cool. Um and I just kind of I had my friends and we hung out and we played D&D or we played whatever role-playing game that we were doing at the time. I wasn't smart enough to be a nerd, but I wasn't dumb either. So I I don't necessarily identify him on those levels. It's like the being on mission thing that I mentioned before. It was the the awkwardness of him, I think too, because I did have a lot of that awkwardness. I think to where when I was younger, and even in my late 20s, I was still very awkward around women and not sharp like that. So I think yeah, that
Yeah.
might be part of it. That it's tough for me to pinpoint. I know this time I'm going to need to start watching for those qualities that might have. I think for me, just I liked the entire series.
Mhm.
Um, from the time I first started watching, I might have mentioned this the last time I was on, but I started watching it from the beginning and always liked it. Never really had any issues. So it's I just enjoyed the series. All of the ensemble of the characters, I think, also was what appealed to me. I did identify with Xander the most, but that's because he was the guy, I think, and but he didn't have any. I think that's what it was. That's what now. As I'm talking this through, I'm getting it out. It's the non-superness of
Yeah.
him. That's what I
He's kind of
identify
like a
with.
stand-in for the audience in some ways, maybe sometimes. I don't know. I don't
Sometimes,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it's the non-superness of him and the bravery that being a not being not superpowered, but yet still being in the fray. was I think for me
So it's
what
like Hawkeye, right? In the Avengers. He's not super powered, and he has that whole speech in Age of Ultron where he's like, "Listen, I'm just a guy with a bow and arrow, but I'm going to go out there and do what I can do." And Xander's a little bit of a Hawkeye.
Mhm.
yeah yeah. What was
Um
I just watching? Oh, on Big Bang Theory, they said something about nobody ever calls Hawkeye, never calls for Hawkeye
yeah.
to save the day, but he's always there.
That's good.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Xander is. Nobody's going to call for him to save the day necessarily, but he's always there. He's always there, and he's always willing to put in. And I think that's what I identified with,
Yeah.
because just like on Lost, I identified with Saeed, even though we're very different, but he was always doing what needed to be done.
Yeah.
Is what, and that's what I look at Xander's. He'll do what needs to be done.
Yeah, that was clear.
No matter what.
Any shakiness, whenever it came time, like I want to help. What's going on with the end of the world? I want to help.
Mhm.
He's right there. I've just been watching, rewatching one of my favorite series from when I was a kid, The Greatest American Hero. That probably,
Oh, I love that
The
show.
I love that.
best.
And one thing watching that now, it's like, because it's this guy who aliens gave him this suit that gives him superpowers, and his buddy who's an FBI agent that helps him find the crimes to solve. And the buddy is Bill Maxwell. I forget, he's played by the guy that was in I
Robert
Spy,
Culp.
Robert Culp.
Robert Culp.
He's
I
out
loved
there with
it,
no
this it's
superheroes, getting shot up, banged up all the I mean, no superpowers.
yeah.
And he's kind of like Xander, he's like, he gets in there anyway
Yeah.
and risks
I think it's my
himself.
favorite episode of that series is the one where they go, where they think they're protecting this witness, and it's actually Bill that's being
Yes.
attacked, and he's the one. And there's a point in that episode, and this is I totally see the parallels now with Xander and Bill, and in this series, because there's a moment in that episode of The Greatest American Hero where
Ralph.
Ralph looks at him and goes, "You're the one who's getting all shot up, and but you're still in the fight."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's at one point, he's like on
Makes him
one
even
leg with a
braver.
crutch and an arm bandage, and he's carrying his gun. And that's Xander. He's the guy that's going to do what needs to be done. When you were doing the podcast about amends, even though he doesn't like Angel, he's willing to jump right in and research and try to figure out, okay, what's wrong with him? Because
Yeah.
I know that he's needed.
He's
for the
very
fight.
loyal to his chosen family, which is this Scooby Gang that is, surrounds Buffy and her slaying. And
Mhm.
it's one of the reasons why his betrayal of Cordelia hits so hard, because she and everyone always thought of Xander as being super loyal, and the fact that he was disloyal to her made it hurt her so much, because she never thought it was something he would be capable of doing.
Mhm.
It was hard for the audience to take too. I think we got a lot of feedback from listeners who were like, "I hate this whole storyline." Like, people just really didn't like seeing Xander and Willow being disloyal to Oz and Cordelia. It hurt them.
Yeah.
Sounds very
Oz
teenagery.
eventually
It is.
forgives Willow, but Cordelia, mm-mm. Like, she's a scorched earth kind of person. Like, you betray her and
Yeah.
she's gonna make your life hell as much as she possibly can.
And I can
I
sympathize with that.
yeah,
Mhm.
I respect that.
Yeah.
I never realized that line, "I'm the surgeon of mean," came from Buffy. I have used it a lot in my life, and I've said it about either being the surgeon of mean or the surgeon of funny. My
Mhm.
my younger brother is like Oz. He just doesn't talk very much. He's a man of few words, but every now and then he drops a bomb into the middle of a conversation that just, like, it's the funniest possible comment to make at that moment. He makes it at exactly the right time, and then it's like, mic drop, I'm out.
Yeah.
And so I always say, like, he's the surgeon of funny.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Be desireless, be excellent, and be gone.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's amazing when he does
Well,
it.
and we have
Yeah.
a mic drop moment in this episode when Cordelia says, "You're the Zeppo."
Yeah.
There's the mic drop moment, title of the episode, that I totally didn't bring up because I didn't live stream it.
Yeah.
So Um, but yeah, this whole series is just really they drop these nuggets of episodes in there every once in a while, and lines that you just it's the like my favorite line from is it Beauty and the Beast was earlier this season,
Yeah, Beauty and the
or is that
Beasts.
coming out? Okay,
Yeah.
is this early this season? My favorite line of the entire series is when Oz is being beaten up by this other guy who's strong and super strong, and Oz starts to change into a werewolf, and he looks, and you see the sun going down, and he says, "Time's up, rules change," and then he changes into a werewolf, and it's that's what this show has. It has those moments, and that's what Xander looking at Jack and saying, "I like the quiet," or "I like the silence,"
Yeah.
is that mic drop moment for Xander, that even though it might be a bluff, and like we talked about, it's a calculated bluff, it's still him going, "I like the silence." And we have that moment. And I had forgotten, I use the term every once in a while, I'll do the "hello nasty" to something that's just awful, and I
Yeah.
realized this is where I got that
This is where you
from.
got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another a powerful line I thought was when Xander was like, "I want to be in your group," and they're like, "Oh, that's a spirit." And he goes, "How do I do it?" And Jack holds up the knife. "You die." That was a good one.
Yeah, yeah. And what was it? The knife was named Katie.
Yeah.
And he's like, "What's what's the difference between you and me?" And Xander's like, "Again, Katie." And that's when Jack hands him the knife and says, "Well, now you've got the knife. What are you going to do with it?" But yeah, and the girl, we didn't mention the girl in this episode.
Oh,
Is just
the car bimbo.
totally fascinated. Yeah, the car bimbo is just totally fascinated by
Yeah.
cars, and
Only dates
she
guys
asked
with
Xander
cars.
about. Yeah, I have a friend of mine who does who remakes or has classic cars, and he builds them and puts them together, and takes them to shows and stuff. And he has a Chevy two-door 210 wagon. He just loves it when somebody calls it something that it's not, and he can explain to them why. No, this is a 210. This is Chevy 210. It's not a Bel Air. It's not a this. It's not a
That's
that.
hilarious.
It's a 210. And so when I heard every time she would spout off those kind of things, I'm just remembering my friend saying something to me and me going, "You have no clue. I understand all the words that are coming out of your mouth, but I don't understand stringing them together. I don't.
Yeah,
That's
like
meaningless to me."
I like that
When she's
she's like, "Oh yeah, this one guy had this one car, and yeah, but then his upholstery was shot, so I dated somebody else."
yeah. She was a hilarious caricature,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I would have enjoyed having her show back up as in just a small way somewhere else in the series, because just being obsessed with cars and only dating guys with cars is
Mhm.
such a pointless,
Oh,
Mm.
and
I
dumb
thought she
way
was
to
going to be a
approach life.
demon, you know.
And Jason, Uncle Rory we never meet Uncle Rory, but he is a running thing
I think
throughout
he
the
comes to the
series.
wedding in season 6.
Okay, maybe
Yeah,
I don't remember that, but yeah, I just
yeah.
Uncle when he says
Uncle
on his
Rory.
Uncle Rory got too
Mm.
many DUIs, and so now I'm gonna use he's
It's
letting me
like
rent this
Norm's wife
bad
on
boy from
Cheers.
him.
Yeah, you never
Yeah,
see her.
yeah.
Yeah, we don't actually see Xander's parents until season 6.
Oh
And
wow, okay.
I don't think we ever see Willow's father. We only ever meet her mother.
Mm, okay.
Uh, Parents are not super involved in this show except for Joyce, who I
Yeah,
love.
and Joyce isn't in
She's
this
not in
episode
this
either.
episode,
So yeah,
which
she and
means I
Spike
didn't
are
get
not.
to play my favorite sound effect where she says, "So, do you live here in town?" Which is only funny if you know the context. Um, uh, what do you guys think is the essence of cool?
I mean, it's different for it can it's not, I don't think there's one essence, but in the context of this episode, I thought it was just not seeking approval from everyone else, but instead figuring out, kind of like what Steve is saying, what is your mission? What is your purpose? What lights you up? What do you enjoy? What do you care about? And do that. And then the people that
Mhm.
align with that will come around you, and the people that don't worry about them. I don't know if that's cool so much, but it's a way of being that is better than being super uncool.
Yeah. Chasing coolness is not
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
That's clear.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, I'm sure of that. It's different. I think it's different for everybody, and it's different. different times in your life, it's going to be different, because you're rarely going to have the same people around you all the time.
Right.
Does that make sense?
And as you age and your life changes, you can't, like, things that were cool in high school, if you're still doing them when you're 50,
Yeah.
you probably need some deep therapy, even if it was perfectly reasonable then.
Mhm. And this is a little bit why sometimes I feel
Mhm.
critical of actors who want their characters only to be cool and badass, because I feel like that comes from a place of looking for approval. Like, why can't you play a character that has some human flaws, because you're too afraid that people aren't going to like you anymore, and then that makes me not like them as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, like, if they're willing to play somebody who looks ridiculous or gets humiliated or loses or is ugly,
Yeah,
like,
like Philip Seymour
those
Hoffman
things make
type
me
characters.
respect
Mhm.
an actor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
exactly. Always think that it must be really fun to play a character that is a giant loser or a supervillain or, like, just all the different ways that you could be not the hero.
Mhm.
I feel like that would almost be more fun
Mhm.
because it's less pressure to carry the story, and you get to spend all your time making your character unique
Mhm.
and
And you
interesting.
get to express some things that maybe you don't really want to in your real life, but it can be an outlet. But I mean,
Yeah.
I think we would all agree that you're the coolest one here. So what would you say, Penny?
Oh, I am? Oh.
Yeah.
Uh,
What's your essence of cool?
that reminds me, many years ago, I lived in a neighborhood of Boston called the Fenway, and there was a coffee shop there called Designs for Living, and I went to that coffee shop almost every day, and on Sundays, I like to get the New York Times and hang out there with a coffee and, like, do the New York Times and sometimes talk to some of the other people who lived in the Fenway. And an article came out in some Boston newspaper that was about the Fenway, and it listed all these different restaurants and things in the neighborhood, and when it got to the coffee shop, it said, "This is where the Fenway's ultra hip natives like to hang out." And I was like, "Am I ultra hip?" And my little sister was with me and she goes, "Nope, not now. You were ultra
Not
hip
anymore.
from
You
when
were.
you picked up that paper until you said that out loud. And then
And then it just
it's done."
vanished.
Like, be the awareness of being cool kind of kills the coolness.
Oh.
But
Mhm.
I think it's a lot about being true to yourself, like we've been saying. I think it's about risk taking. People that I think are cool are people that buck the status quo, who try new things, who go to new places, who are interested in other people and curious about the world. It's one of the things I like about this Podcastica community that I've become a part of is that pretty much everybody in the community is like that. They want to know, what was your life like and what's your perspective on this, and what is something else that's interesting that I could get interested in. Like, everybody's very, to
Engaged.
me, cool.
Yeah.
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 And being engaged is cool. Like,
Mhm.
there's a certain group of people that think being bored and being blasé is cool, but that's not for me.
Yeah.
I'm more of a, like, dive in and go whole hog, and
Yeah.
that's what's
I
cool.
mean, I think, yeah, the thing about being bored or blasé or contrary is it's more trustable, because when someone is trying really hard to, like, oh yeah, agree with everything that you like because they want you to like them, then you don't trust it. It's like you're just saying all of that because you want something from me. Whereas if someone acts bored or uninterested or or contrary, then you might be like, it'll turn you into the person that's like, hey, why aren't they seeking my approval? What don't I know? So it's this weird psychological thing. But for me, when I got to a certain age, I'm like, no, I don't want to be like that. If I'm excited about something, I want to say it, I don't care. And that feels better, you know?
Yeah. It's part of the growth of, geek culture or nerd
Yeah.
culture. When we were all kids, being a nerd, being into, like, science fiction shows and movies and wanting to talk about your favorite shows or books or stories was considered nerdy and
Hmm.
uncool. And it's like our generation was like, "No, it is cool." And we just decided it.
Yeah.
And we were
Mhm.
like, "Nope, we're gonna make it cool, and it's cool to be really, really excited about the things you're
Yeah.
excited about."
And
and then it just flipped.
Well, and one cool thing about the internet, and lately it feels like there's a lot less cool, but it is cool.
Yeah.
But one cool thing is, if you like something, you can put it out there and attract other people who like it, and then you can feel sort of validated in that and find your people, rather than just feel like, oh, am I the only
You're
one?
all alone in it.
hmm
Yeah. What about the zombies in this episode? What did you think about this version of zombiehood?
I mean, it was awesome to see Cudlitz for one thing. Michael Cudlitz.
Yeah, people who don't know, Michael Cudlitz is a very beloved member of the Walking Dead cast.
Yeah.
And also a director of many Walking Dead episodes. And so we are all Walking Dead fans
We
and
love
love
him.
Michael Cudlitz.
And he always played kind of jockish bully types when he was younger. He was in Grosse Point Blank, and I loved him in that. And when I did a Q&A panel with him, I got him to recite that drunk poem that he did in that movie.
Oh, that's such a great moment.
I love it. But I had some notes about these guys. Can I go into it? Is that cool?
Yeah.
Please.
So I think they're kind of like the cool bad boys, and Xander getting mixed up with the wrong crowd. That's what they represent, because his friends are ignoring him. And so he has time on his hands, and they're seemingly interested. And it just it touches on the importance of friends and how they can shape your life and everything. I thought it was really fun to see him raise his bro friends from the dead, because they're all like coming out of the grave and ready to party. It was hilarious. And like Cudlitz, I can't believe you raised me. That is so awesome. You are the coolest. And then he went to another guy, Jack, and he's like, the blood of the earth shall restore him and he shall rise. And then you see his head come through and he's like, dudes. and they want to like party and pick up girls and just like destroy things. So I guess they're just like the bad boys. And I thought it was kind of funny that it didn't even faze them that they had died, and there was no adjustment period towards being undead. They were just like party, ready to party.
Yeah.
Beer. Yeah. Definitely.
And then when they need him for his to be the wheelman, so getting the car did help with these guys, but that just shows how shallow they are. And I guess that's what I thought. I thought it was funny that Cudlitz died by a vending machine. I liked them. I thought they were funny, and that's what I really liked.
Yeah. Steve, what about you? What do you think about these in terms of the spectrum of zombies that we enjoy?
It's always fun to get the intelligent undead, the intelligent zombie kind of thing is always a draw, because you're used to the ones we see on The Walking Dead where they're just they're slow moving, they're all messed up. To quote the Walking Dead cast. But I liked them. I think there's a certain aspect of the intelligent zombie, the zombie that can talk or that just wants to party. I'm not going to eat your brains. I just want to party and hang out and
blow up
drink
your
beer
school
and make a cake. And then blow up a school. That's a side note. I enjoyed them, and I remember watching it for the first time. I think I hadn't really been exposed to much horror stuff, so I didn't care that they could talk and all this, that they weren't trying to eat brains or anything. I liked them.
Yeah, I didn't care about that at all. Because I think it just doesn't make sense to me to critique this in terms of, how would a zombie really be, or something like that,
Yeah, no, that's
they're
not the
there
point.
to be the bad boy crowd that attracts him. And
Yeah. And it's just because it's the Hellmouth that the bad boy crowd is dead and comes back to life. That's just a Sunnydale
Right.
special. Because
Yeah.
in any other town, Xander would just get messed up with guys that want to like rob a liquor
Yeah,
store or something.
live
But
guys.
this is
Right.
Sunnydale, so
Yeah.
it's gonna have to
Yeah.
be dead guys.
Yeah.
I love the scene with Giles where Giles is trying to raise the spirits and Xander runs into him, and I clipped it, of course.
Giles, hey. What's going on?
Just trying to gain access to the spirit guides. Not going very well, I'm afraid. What are you doing here?
We were just raising some heck
Xander! Go!
Listen, do you guys need any help?
Oh, no, thank you. Probably best if you stay out of trouble.
No chance of that.
Xander! Motor!
Something different about this. Man, there's something in the air. Stench of death.
Yeah, I think it's Bob.
We may all be called upon to fight when it happens.
When what happens, exactly?
I better go. Hopefully we should have time to prepare. All we need is a few weeks.
Tonight?
There's another one of those transitions that you're talking about, that it goes from,
A few
Giles saying, "Oh,
weeks.
we just need a few weeks," and then tonight it's happening tonight. And this is where in Sunnydale we need to know what was it in later seasons, and I don't want to spoil anything too much, but a character's going to ask, what's the plural of apocalypse?
Yeah.
Just apocalypses.
Yeah.
By the
I
way.
think this is the fourth apocalypse on the show.
Let's see, the master. It's either the third or the fourth. Yeah,
Oh,
something like that.
fifth. I think it's the fifth.
That whole
So,
storyline kind of
yeah.
because it was like we've said, it was a bit almost like a parody. It's the thing going on in the background that usually is in the foreground of this show. It
Mhm.
seems
Yeah.
like, and it reminded me a little bit. I've got all these old show references, but Moonlighting with Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd. They're
Yeah.
private investigators, and the early seasons were all about the cases that they would get. But then that got tired, and so they would just have other storylines going on, and the cases were just kind of like a background thing that didn't really matter so much, kind of like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And they ramped up the drama on the side story, and I
Yeah.
love that we never truly see the monster. We just see like some of its tentacles. And that one moment when the one zombie's running past the library and stops and looks in the window and he's like, wow.
Yeah.
And
It's good stuff.
I did, yeah, and the Jack at the end is like, he's like, next time you turn your back, I'm gonna get you, and opens the door and gets eaten by Oz.
Yeah. It's too good. It's too
So
perfect.
they
Yeah.
so I did know, I must have seen an episode where the Seth Green guy Oz was a werewolf. I knew that, and so they let him out of his cage and tranked him just so they could bring him to the fight area and have him help. Is that what was going on there?
No.
No.
I think
They moved him from his cage because the cage was really close to where the Hellmouth was going to open up.
Oh,
And so they tranked him and moved him just to get him out of the way. Because when he's a werewolf,
but
he
he was
doesn't have any
free
control.
though.
He was in a locked room, and
yeah, and just
Jack
having the room that
opened the
Jack
Oh, I
walks
door,
see. Got
into.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
and that's how he got out. And ate Jack, which is
And then was
usually
full.
we don't
I
like for Oz to eat people, but since Jack was
I mean, he
already
was dead.
dead, it's like
He's already dead, so technically,
it's like
I love it. I think it's another one of my favorite moments of the show is in the episode when they're talking to Faith about Oz being a werewolf, and Xander says something like, "It's a long story," or Buffy says, "It's a long story," and then Oz just goes, "Got bit." And I guess it's not that long of a story actually is what is the next. There's got bit.
It's such a
So
classic Oz moment, the man of few words.
yeah.
Somebody on Facebook created a new like which Buffyverse character are you, like psychological quiz, whatever, and I got Oz as my answer, and I was like, oh man, I wish I could be that cool and zen
In
and
real life, yeah.
laid back. I am definitely not. I've always most identified with Willow as being sort of like I was a smart, nerdy kid who
Mm.
had unrequited crushes on my best friends, and
Well, I had a point.
I would have loved to have witchy powers.
I had a point, just quick hits of the characters without much context and where I knew them before this. Should I go into that?
Mhm.
Just kind of,
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love
because
to
it's
hear
my
it.
first, time, at least in decades, watching any of this. Xander's nerdy, goofy, awkward, but funny and loyal, helpful, and brave. That's what I got of him. Reminded me of Matthew
Mhm.
Perry. It stood out that his top priority was helping his friends. That seemed like his number one thing. My view of this episode was a little bit colored by, I think she was going to tell it on your podcast, Sam on her story of asking Nicholas Brendan a question at a convention and he was a jerk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she did tell it on the
And
podcast.
she
Yeah,
had
he
told
was a
me
big
that,
jerk to
and
her.
I was like, oh man, I got to get that out of my head because his character's not like that at all. Cordelia, I just didn't like at all.
Yeah.
Faith, fierce, and horny. That's the only two things I got out of this episode. I'm sure
That's
she's
that's accurate.
pretty good.
Yep.
Accurate. Yeah.
Elijah Dushku. I knew her from the lead in Dollhouse, another
Mhm.
Joss Whedon show that I really liked, even though it was very uneven. She wasn't quite up to the task of that role because it required her, if you know the premise, they can inhabit different personalities, inhabit these dolls, and so you have to be able to act like totally different type people. And there was
Yeah, I always thought that there was a lot of Eliza Dushku that came through
yeah,
in all of her
and
characters.
Amy Acker was another actress in that show that when she played other
Mhm.
characters, I was like, oh, she should have been the lead. She's so good at, you just think she's someone totally different.
Yeah.
She's
And
another
once you watch
Whedon double person. She's in Angel. We'll
Mm.
get her starting
Mhm.
in season
2
2 of Angel. Yeah.
2 or 3.
She's
2.
great.
Yeah, and once you watch Orphan Black and
Yeah.
you see and the actress name
Tatiana
is
Maslany.
Tatiana
escaping me.
Maslany.
Yeah, Maslany. Once you see her do it, when you watch Dollhouse again, it just
Yeah,
Yeah,
it doesn't even
it doesn't
compare.
too
hold up.
bad. But other
Yeah.
ones, Seth Green, I like I said, I think I knew he was a werewolf. You didn't get too much of his character in this, except that he's a man of few words. He seems a little wounded or something. I don't know. But
He might still be feeling wounded at this point from the Willow Xander
Mm.
cheating fiasco, but mostly he's just like
Yeah,
Oz
this
is just
is
like very even keel.
okay.
this is prior to them getting back together.
No, they're back
Is that-
together.
No, you're right. In Helpless, they got back together in Helpless, right?
Yeah.
Because he says it was like I was missing a torso.
Mm.
Yeah.
So they might have. I wonder if they filmed these out of order.
Yeah, because I was
And-
thinking that Zeppo could have gone anywhere after Amends. They could have like slotted it. Well, no, it
Mhm.
had to come before Bad Girls. Anyway,
Yeah, but
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised if this was filmed before Helpless,
yeah.
just because of what you're saying about Oz's character not being right there next to Willow all the time. So
and with him, Seth Green, I knew him as Dr. Evil's son in Austin Powers and the voice of Howard the Duck in the MCU.
Yeah.
that's right.
Willow, I knew she was a witch, so I must have seen that somewhere in an episode I watched decades ago. I just think of her as super nice and quirky with a very distinctive way of being. I can't really describe it any more than that. But and Allison Hannigan, I knew her just from this. Like I'd seen enough to really get a distinct impression of her, probably more than any other character. It really stood out, her performance. But I know she was in How I Met Your Mother, but I didn't really watch very much of that.
Mhm.
I'm not going to probably be making any friends saying this, but I think Buffy, I always thought she seemed a bit bland, very focused, powerful, fierce, but I knew Sarah Michelle Gellar from All My Children, where she was Erica Kane's daughter, Kendall.
Yeah.
And I just never thought she had much range. But am I wrong? Like if I watched this series more, would I get a more appreciation?
I think if you watch the series, she has a lot more.
Yeah.
This episode is not indicative of Sarah Michelle Gellar's acting ability.
No.
I mean,
because
she was
she's-
kind of a
she's
side
definitely-
character here, yeah.
and she's being like really melodramatic and ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think that season 1 of Buffy is like we said, it's just weak. And so the acting you saw from her in that, like the writing in season 1 isn't as funny, isn't as quippy.
Mm.
She's not given as many interesting things to do. It just gets so much deeper in season 2 when Angel turns evil
Okay.
and she has to
Mhm.
deal with that. And that's when her character gets really interesting. And then it carries through the rest of the series. She also gets to be funnier a lot more
Mm.
starting in season 2.
Yeah, see, I haven't
That
seen
she
any of
gets a
that. It
lot more
makes me
quippy lines.
curious now.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. She's and particularly if you watch any of the 3 episodes before this, the Amends Gingerbread and Helpless, I think you'll see the
Okay.
range she has.
Just
Yeah.
check out one of those.
In those. Yeah, yeah.
Helpless is a remarkable episode in terms of Sarah Michelle Gellar's acting. She has to portray a lot of things that she doesn't regularly portray as Buffy.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's really interesting. Although I don't know if it would stand out to you without having seen some of the other ones first. Like I
Right.
wouldn't go watch that one next. Because it won't
Need the
work without
context.
the
Yeah.
context. Yeah, that's one that
Right.
needs context.
And then last, this guy telling Buffy that the demons are doing their thing tonight, and they're specifically coming after Buffy and Angel. You know, the guy that was all beat up.
Oh yeah, Willie.
He's
Mhm.
Saviero Guerra, and he plays Mocha Joe on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I didn't know he
That's
was on
okay.
Curb.
Spite
I never
Score.
I never watched that show, so
Yeah.
It's great.
So you know, Jason, he runs a demon bar. He's a human,
Oh.
but he runs a bar that demons and vampires hang out at, and Buffy regularly beats him up for information. But in this particular episode, he was already beat up when she got there.
Interesting. Sounds very True Blood.
So they call him
It's
Willie the
Slayer.
Snitch.
The
Yeah.
Slayer's here. The Slayer. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he'll always be like, "Oh, the Slayer's here," and then all his clientele will like slowly stand up and just like fade out of the room because they're all like, "Oh no, we don't want her to slay us while we're in here." I love Willie's Bar. It's one of my favorite conceits on the show because I think the idea that demons need a place to go and socialize and hang out is really funny.
It reminds me of True Blood a little bit.
Yeah.
Vampire Bar.
Yeah.
What did you think of Giles? Did you have something on there?
I mean,
because you don't get a lot of
no,
him,
but I have a sense of him, like I said, as a Professor X type character. Intelligent, cerebral, in command, knowledgeable, you know, good person, you know.
He has a really fun backstory where you find out that when he was a teenager, he was not a good person. And some of his past comes back to haunt him from time to time. And his teenager name was Ripper. And so every now and then you get to see Ripper, the Ripper version of Giles. And Kara and I are always like, "You mean sexy Giles?" Like we like we like Ripper.
That's funny.
Yeah, I think I can appreciate Giles' character more now than I did in my late 20s watching it. Because now I'm older than what he's portraying. I think he's supposed to be like in his mid 40s or something like that, but he looks more like he's probably in his 50s, and so I can more relate to some of the things with him. And so I think I'm appreciating that character a lot more in this rewatch.
Me too.
Than I ever have
It's
before.
so
And
interesting
I am
when you
obsessed with Joyce. Yeah.
when you watch a show like Cheers, for example, as a kid, and then you grow up and watch it again, and you're like, Frasier was 30 years old. What the hell?
Yeah.
Whatever. It is.
Yeah, when you realize that Wilford Brimley was our age now when he did Cocoon, and you look at it and you go, what's
Am I
so
that
different?
old? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like, I think I'm the same age as like the youngest Golden Girl.
Yeah, something like that. And what was it, Jason? You said something about Pat Morita. We're now older than he was when he
Mr.
did
Miyagi.
the Karate Kid. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, aging. It happens.
it's true. But some of us are becoming silver foxes, and we'll hold on to that. So
some of us are becoming purple foxes. So
hey, there you go. There you go. I lost track of who is it. They keep talking about Rick.
Rick Grimes.
The feedback show. They Kara, when you and Kara were on the feedback show.
Yeah, that he's
right?
like a silver fox now.
A silver fox, yeah.
Yeah. Andy Lincoln, very handsome guy. When he doesn't have the like full bushy beard that makes him look scary,
like a
he's
homeless
really
creeper or something.
Yeah. That guy. The Negan line. We touched on it briefly, but that ending speech where Cordelia is trying to cut him down and he's just standing there kind of staring at her, and then he just walks away and she's like, what, how are and she's so floored by the fact that she can't get to him. And I'm going to be interested to watch this over the next few episodes to see how that progresses, with
Yeah.
them, because I don't remember how that relationship goes. So I'm excited to see that. And that, like I said, that ending scene always gets me, where he's just walking away with that sly smile on his face, and she's just like, what, so.
Yeah. He turns the tables on her meanness, which is
Mhm.
a good moment for him.
Hmm.
But because I have my issues with Xander and
How
his
he
relationships with women, part of me is like, "Aw, Cordelia."
Yeah, now, and through the lens of what JW has become, it's also sometimes tough to watch, and like I said, it's
yeah.
hard for me to defend him sometimes, but
Yeah.
this episode, I think, it was a
It's
good one.
I was thinking about him, and it's interesting how we have to sort of reconcile our thoughts about him with, well, in your guys' case, your love for the show, but there's a lot of things like that where the person has been revealed to be something, and you're like, oh, wow. But with him, I mean, I love Serenity and Dollhouse, so I'm a big Joss Whedon fan. I had been, of his
Mhm.
stuff, but now it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I still like those things, but he's not allowed to do anything else. Is that okay too?
I think he's probably
Yeah.
still doing stuff, just not as in the
Publicly.
public eye. He's got a successful production company
Mm,
and they churn out constant content. He probably still owns all the Buffy licenses, and there's like
right.
9 million Buffy comic books out there.
And there's a part of
Uh,
me that's like, he shouldn't be able to do that, I mean, so I don't know.
yeah.
It's
I
interesting.
mean, the thing
It's
about the allegations against him is that he was an abusive jerk, but I don't know if he ever did anything that was like illegal
Yeah,
or criminal, in any way. So,
it's
eh,
true. Yeah, I see what you're
Well,
saying.
he was selective. He apparently, from what I've not read deeply into it, but from what I've heard, and the few things I've seen, he was very selective
yeah, he was only
in who
abusive
he
to certain
targeted.
people.
That's creepy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I only had one more point. It's just funny things I thought were
Hmm.
funny.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Uh, I liked when Oz was growling in his cage and Willow said he's cranky. I don't know why. It's a funny way.
Such an
Talk about a
understatement for a
werewolf,
werewolf.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Giles is going on about the problem they're trying to solve with the apocalyptic end of the world and says, all we know is that the fate of the entire world rests on it. And then he looks in the donut box. Did you eat all the jellies? Did you want a jelly? I
Yeah,
always have a
she had
jelly.
3. Buffy had 3.
I'm the one that says, let's have a jelly in the mix. And then Willow goes, we're sorry. Buffy had 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when Xander says to Jack, the important thing is that we're all right and we can work this out like 2 reasonable. And then he pulls out the knife and he goes, frontiersman. That was good. There are a few more that we've already mentioned, but I guess my favorite was that Oz was oddly full.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's good
Oddly
stuff.
full.
Well, let's get into some trivia, and there's a lot of fun trivia for this episode. And I'll start us off that Shannon Rowe, the actor who played Jack O'Toole in this episode, can also be seen with Seth Green in the movie Can't Hardly Wait, and with Nicholas Brendan again in the 2000 movie Psycho Beach Party. I have
Nice.
not seen Psycho Beach Party.
I haven't
We
either.
are considering Can't Hardly Wait for one of our season breaks. We might cover that.
Mm.
Is
It's
that
another good sort of teenager movie.
one that was in Party of 5? Is she the star? No, who starred in that?
Yeah, it's Jennifer Love
Jennifer
Hewitt.
Love Hewitt. Yeah.
Love Hewitt. Yeah.
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 And it's one of those high school house party movies
Yeah.
where there's like a giant party.
We
Yeah.
need more of those. That's what I think. Michael Cudlitz, who played the zombie Bob in this episode, has been in Band of Brothers as Sergeant Denver Bull Randleman, Forces of Nature, Grosse Point Blank, A River Runs Through It, Beverly Hills 90210 as Tony Miller, 24 as Agent Rick Phillips, and of course our
24.
favorite post-apocalyptic redhead Abraham in The Walking Dead, Sergeant Abraham
I
Ford.
forgot about him. Yeah, in 24, and also he was in Lost, a couple episodes of Lost as well.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Playing a
Yeah.
cop.
That's right.
So Nicholas Brendan has said that he cried when he first read the script for the Zeppo, as he was so delighted with it and its meaning for his character. He says it's one of his favorite
Aw,
episodes.
makes me like it more.
It would
can
be,
see that.
right? He gets to be the big star.
Mhm.
I don't think we have another very Xander-centric episode until The Replacement in season 4, which is another really great one. Steve, you'll definitely have to come back on for that one.
Yeah, yeah. We'll talk
um,
about that in spoilers probably.
yeah. Eliza Dushku was quoted talking about her family seeing her sex scene in this episode. My grandmother wouldn't return my phone calls for 2 weeks after the Xander romp scene in the hotel room. I remember my little cousins were all excited because I was on the show, and in the middle of the scene, their father turned off the television. So they went to school the next day being the only kids who had not seen the outcome. All their friends went, "Your cousin had sex!" And they were humiliated.
That's hilarious.
That's
Uh,
it's too bad we don't have somebody who was watching this way too young on with us this time.
Oh yeah, Kara. She really should not have been
And
watching this at the age she was
oh, I
watching it.
know. Yeah, and
yeah,
by the way, Kara, I don't know if you're listening, but I'm bummed it didn't work out for you to come on. I was looking forward to talking
yeah.
with you about the show. Next, Vaughn Armstrong, who played the cop in the episode, might be familiar to Star Trek fans. He's made 18 appearances in various Star Trek series as 11 different characters of 8 different races. He played Admiral Maxwell Forrest in Star Trek Enterprise, Harry in Days of Our Lives, and has also appeared in episodes of The West Wing, ER, Beverly Hills 90210, Frasier, Seinfeld, and Cheers. He got around.
Wow. Yeah. Whitney Dillon, who played Xander's car mad date Lizette. Was that her name? Lizette?
I don't know if we ever heard
Also
it.
played a serving girl in the Angel episode There's No Place Like Prutzgrim. She also appeared in Coyote Ugly.
We are at the point of the episode where I ask a somewhat ridiculous question, which is, does it still slay? Steve, what do you think?
I mean, for me, most assuredly, even though there's a couple of things that are dated, there's a couple of things that, like I said at the beginning, you kind of have to watch it through the 90s kind of lens. But yeah, for me, it still slays for sure.
Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoy the 90s lens, so that's part of the appeal for me. And I, especially when I really got into, and I mean, I kind of was on first watch, but second watch even more, the psyche of what Xander was going through. That really gave me something to grab onto. And then there was a lot of funny stuff other than that. So yeah, very much enjoyed it.
Fantastic. And obviously, I still loved it. I think it slays and really holds up very well, except for the homophobia and the use of the word trim, which really I find very offensive and gross. And there was another thing that Jason that you pointed out that didn't age well. I
R
can't
word.
remember now what it was. Oh, the R word.
Yeah, the R
Yeah.
word is used.
Although
RU,
it's
yeah.
very believable that Jack would have said it
Yeah,
in that moment.
Yeah.
true.
We don't have any news. Big shock, because the show was on 25 years ago. But we do have a bunch of feedback.
Nice.
I think it's time we head over to the Bronze and order some maybe chicken wings and a couple of beers and listen to what some of our listeners had to say.
Bronze things. Things of bronze.
We'll start with Becca, who just said bonus points for a young Cudlets. And I couldn't agree more.
And then we go on with Becky, who says, "Hello all, thoughts on season 3, episode 13? Is it episode 13? I thought we
Yeah.
said it was like 8.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Didn't really care for all the fragile Xander moments from the gang, but I suppose it was necessary to move the story along. Love the car he gets. The Jimmy Olsen reference was cool. Love my DC comics, and I found it hilarious that Giles didn't get it. Giles' reaction is how I feel talking to the teenagers in my life. Sometimes I have to Google what they say, and there's a couple of smiley face emojis after that one. I thought I forgot about baking a cake. Why didn't Xander just drive away while they robbed the hardware store?
Oh, that was because
yeah.
he ran into Willow and then he lost time to run away, to drive away.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He really escapes, but goes from one mess to another. It's true. I also forgot Xander and Faith hooked up. Her kicking him out after was too funny. Seems I forgot the majority of what happened in this episode. The chase scenes through the school were great. Very Scooby-Doo-ish. And
Yes,
Star Wars-ish.
they
as
were
well.
really entertaining.
Yes.
She goes on. Xander asking, "Where's the Slayer when you need one?" And then the camera changing to the madness happening in the library was cool. Yeah, I like the back and forth between the two groups a lot. Also
Mhm.
love dude running back to the window, staring in and saying, "Wow." Yay for Xander turning the tables on Jack. Oz talking about oddly feeling full the next day was great. The episode was a nice palate cleanser after the heaviness of Helpless. Favorite quote, Xander, "I'll call ya," as his date flees the scene when Bob rises from the dead.
Yeah, that was
It
really
was funny.
funny.
He like totally didn't like her anyway. He's like, Angel
Yeah.
comes and he's like, "Talk to me." Giles discussing the big evil of the week and mentioning the stench of death, and Xander replying, "I think it's Bob." I don't know what that means.
That Bob
That's
is the
when
stench of death because he was undead and they just raised him.
Got it. Yeah.
when they're in the
Oh.
graveyard.
Yeah.
Faith feeling frisky. You up for it, Xander? Oh, I'm up.
That's right. I forgot about that line. I've just never been up with people before.
Yeah.
So there is a virginity tie there probably.
Yeah, and Up With
Oh,
People is another pop
yes.
culture reference. There used to be a group called Up With People that like traveled around the country doing like wholesome teenage entertainment, like song and dance numbers.
Yeah,
Oh.
but it
That was
does
like in the
sound like he's
80s.
saying, "I've never had a hard on with anyone else in the room before."
I'm pretty sure that is
That's
what he's saying.
yeah, that's what he's trying to say.
Xander, after Jack stops the bomb from going off, good boy. Knowing this was a Xander heavy episode, I was prepared not to like it, but turns out I did like it. Nicholas Brendan did an excellent job of portraying the many sides of Xander, and kudos to him for some excellent comedic acting. I agree. Aside from the "not in a gay way" comment, I loved all things Xander. It was cool to see Xander find courage and to do it on his own. When the gang was talking about their fight and he approaches, I was afraid he'd be all braggy, but instead just had a short line and walked away, and he didn't even take all the bait from Cordy. Yeah, I mean, he got his personal power there. Xander with a quiet confidence was awesome. Have a wonderful weekend. Grr arg.
Thanks, Becky. And then we heard from Jolene, who says, "This is such a clever episode of Buffy. I feel like it's one of those episodes that really takes the mick out of itself, and they do it so well. There's so many funny moments in it, and the flicking between the two stories where we don't see hardly any of what would usually be classed as the main storyline with the Hellmouth opening and another end of the world situation, and then to Xander having the strangest night of his life and saving the day all on his own. I know Xander isn't always perfect in Buffy, but this episode brings out the best in him, and it's great to see him doing something good that isn't because he wants validation from Buffy. I do have to say, though, that as much as I love this episode, it would have been nice to have a Xander centric episode that went into his home life a bit. We never really get the full story there. Great appearance from Michael Cudlitz as Bob, too. I remember when he first appeared in The Walking Dead shouting, "That's Bob from Buffy!" Anyway, my favorite parts. Xander's desperation for Angel to talk to him in the Bronze so he can get away from Car Girl. "Angel, buddy, friend buddy, you want to sit and talk?" And then the "I'll call you" when she runs away at the graveyard. Jason, what you don't know is that Xander detests Angel. So that scene is
Oh,
extra funny.
okay.
Xander turning up at Angel's mansion looking for help while Buffy and Angel are in that full-blown over-the-top argument about sacrifice and watching each other die, so he just leaves to deal with it himself. Parker's head coming off after Xander makes the huge speech before finding out how to defuse the bomb. The chase running past the library where we see a glimpse of the open Hellmouth but have absolutely no idea what's actually happening. I like the quiet. The Scoobies at school the next day, all talking about this huge battle we didn't see, and Willow saying Xander should be glad he wasn't at school, and the look on his face, laugh cry emoji. I have got to say, though, I really don't like the bit with Faith. I get that it adds to his bizarre night, but I just feel that it's really unnecessary. There's so many other things that they could have done. Him just saving Faith rather than the other way around for once is enough.
Yeah, not only, I mean, it felt out of the blue. Like I was like, "What? Why is this here?" What? Not in a I'm offended way, but just I'm confused. Like I don't understand why they put that in this
Yeah,
episode.
it could be because they wanted to show a little bit of Faith's character, but
Mm,
part of me thinks it's just because JW wanted
some
his
sex.
character to have sex, yeah.
Mm.
Like he's often said that Xander is his stand-in, so I think he just was like, yeah, he gets a hot girl.
Okay, so in this episode where Xander's having like a transition in his life or a level up or growth or something, that had to be part of it, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't like that. Now, the more we talk about it, I don't like that now I mean, I think they wanted to have Faith in the episode
Yeah.
more than she was, but yeah, I guess it's not really necessary for the
I
story.
mean, it's an old trope that like men having sex is like an accomplishment, it's like a
Oh, the
win.
rite of passage
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah, they
yeah.
won
It's also that
something and then, women characters get raped and that's how they get tough and have character sometimes and both of those things need to go away in
yeah.
our
I
narratives. But in the 90s they were full on like usual
Agreed.
tropes.
Yeah.
So that part doesn't
yeah.
age super well.
Well, and yeah, and we see that in Firefly also. There's an episode of Firefly where somebody gets oh, what's her name? Marina Bakarin's character to sleep with his son so he can become a man.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Gross. Gross.
yeah.
Um There are so many funny quotes in this one to choose from. My personal favorites, though, Giles saying, "There's something different about this menace. In the air, I can feel it. The stench of death." Xander, "Yeah, I think that's
Mhm.
Bob." And then Xander, "What do you mean? It's my thing." Willow, "Your thing?" Xander, "My thing." Buffy, "Is this a penis metaphor?"
I forgot about that moment.
Sort of.
It's a
I'm
pretty
car guy.
yeah, I mean, for a lot of guys, it
It
definitely is
is.
a penis metaphor, their car. And then we got a voicemail from our good friend, Sam.
Hey Penny and Kara, it's Sam, the Zeppo. Definitely one of my higher ranking episodes. It's very creative to have the dual storylines in there, and it was very funny. So I think that just kind of helps endear the episode to me. It's almost like the writers didn't have a lot of faith in a Xander-centered episode. So they put in an extra storyline in the background of this apocalyptic thing that was happening over the Hellmouth because they're like, just in case people are bored with Xander Harris or they just don't connect to him. But I thought it was really well done and very funny. And speaking of the humor in it, I don't know why they had such a problem with Cordelia Chase's character. I mean, they put her in like bank teller haute couture or something. Like she does not dress like a high schooler. No one I went to high school dressed like this. So it was just every time she showed up, she had these great lines and insightful takes, and I'm just like, oh my god, you look like you have to go pick your kids up after you finish talking to Xander. So it was just really funny. And speaking of being way too old for high schoolers, I adore Michael Cudlitz. I mean, even before The Walking Dead, he is way too old to be playing a high schooler on the show. Like, him and O'Toole, supposed to be high schoolers, I just kept laughing. Because, oh my God, they look like they have a 401k, they have a day job, they do trading, like they're gonna tell me about the stock market any second now. Like, I could not keep a straight face. I'm like, there's no way they're high schoolers. But I mean, it was the actors were amazing. So I suspended my disbelief. And yeah, I guess I felt a little bad for Xander, I guess, in this episode. Between like the weird sexuality with O'Toole and the knife, that was a little weird. And then, Faith doing him a solid and then kicking him out. I wouldn't wish that on anyone the first time that they had sex. To be fair, this is how Xander treats women, as sexual objects to be used and discarded, so I don't feel that bad for him. And Faith tried to boost his ego by saying, that was great, I have to go shower. I'm like, Faith, that is a very loving white lie, because there's no way that was good. Looking forward to the episode. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say.
Thanks, Sam. One thing I love about Sam's feedback is that she always gives examples of what she means.
Yeah.
You know how she's like, she looks like she has a 401k or she has to pick up her
Yes.
kids. It's
Awesome.
so colorful and fun. Yeah, we have often remarked on Cordelia's wardrobe that I think she looks like a paralegal. Like she works at a law firm. She's always sort of corporate business casual dressed.
She
I
looks
don't know what
and
that's all
dresses and kind of acts like an ex-girlfriend of mine.
Oh, really?
So
That's
that might be
hilarious.
part of my reaction to her.
All right, that is the end of the main section of the podcast. Stay tuned for the Watcher's Diaries if you want to hear the spoilery discussion.
If you want to join in on the conversation, you can find all our contact information at podcastica.com and the show notes for each episode. And there's a search thing on there, so you can search and see if we've covered anything. It's a good resource.
Yeah. Also at podcastica.com, you'll find links to our social media pages and all of our other shows.
And there are so many Podcastica shows to enjoy. We talked a little bit earlier about The Cast of Us, that is covering the current Walking Dead spinoff, The Ones Who Live. That's been fantastic. I'm really enjoying listening to that.
One I've been mentioning recently because someone said they just discovered that we covered The Handmaid's Tale, and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you found that, because we love doing that podcast, me and Daphne and Wendy, and I was a little nervous to podcast about that show because I'm a man, but it's been great. And the showrunner started tweeting out that he liked the podcast, so we had him on for some interviews, and it's just been a really good experience. So if you're into that show, maybe check out that podcast.
Yeah, the podcast really helps with a show like Handmaid's Tale, which is so heavy and serious and deals with so many intense emotional issues that hearing you guys process it out loud and analyze it really helps me with each episode and putting it in a place in my brain as opposed to in my heart, because that show can really hurt you.
It's so disturbing. And also the feedback is my favorite, the people write in with their reactions and stories and everything. It's really good.
It's really great. Steve, what have you been listening to lately?
Gosh, just coming back from my big trip, the Revisited podcast with Ben and Kristen covering Ted Lasso, getting caught up on that podcast has been great. They're covering, they just started season 3 of that show, so it's been good to listen to that. And of course, The Cast of Us, getting caught up with the Rick and Michonne show. And just, yeah, that's about it right now. And Still Slaying, of course.
Thank you.
I got all caught up on your podcast just earlier today, and I haven't been able to go back to the Rewatcher podcast. This is the other Buffy podcast, but sooner or later I'll get back.
And I think I said this last when we did Heather's, but anytime anyone mentions Still Slaying, they're just like, they're so good. So I've heard that from multiple people.
You guys are great.
Thank you. We love doing it. We really do. And if you like what we're doing, give us a 5-star rating, leave a review, or like, follow, subscribe, and all the things. And next time we will be covering season 3, episode 14, Bad Girls. And I'm excited about that. Thanks, everybody. And yeah, great knife. Although I think it may technically be a sword.
She's called Katie.
You gave it a girl's name. How very serial killer of you.
All right, that's the end of the non-spoiler section. If you want to avoid spoilers, you should stop listening right now.
Beep.
Now.
All right, on to the Watcher's Diaries, where we talk about spoilery stuff and spoilery things.
It's too bad we can't sneak a look at the Watcher Diaries. I'm sure it's full of fun facts to know and tell.
Yeah, that's too bad. That stuff is private.
Also, Giles keeps them in his office, in his personal files.
Most importantly, it would be wrong.
So we can talk now about what's going to happen in the future with Xander and Faith.
Yeah, they come back to this moment a few times in the series. Even in season 4, I think there's an episode when Faith comes back from her coma, where Xander makes some comment to Giles about him and Faith having a thing. And because I just rewatched those episodes from season 4, so this is going to come back up again, this moment that they have together. But it's the really the tragic one is it the next episode where they're talking, where Willow, Buffy, and Giles are talking about Xander,
I think
and like every time
I
think it is Bad Girls.
It's Consequences.
It might be, but it's
yeah.
Okay, because I just remember there's that moment where Buffy notices that every time she says Faith's name, Xander's eye twitches, and later when they figure that out, like Buffy and Giles come to the realization, they look at Willow, and Willow's like, "Yeah, I figured it out like several minutes ago before you guys even figured it out." that they had sex, and then we see her break down in the stacks, just crying.
Yeah, it's a
Because
sad moment because even though she has moved on from her, unrequited love for Xander, the idea that he had sex with someone else, it still hurts
Mhm.
her. It's like the last piece of that crush that gets
Yeah,
killed off there.
And man,
yeah. Uh,
he didn't even, I mean, she really initiated it, but I guess he could have just said no.
Yeah. He has earlier in the season when they first meet Faith, he definitely is attracted to her and he makes a lot of comments to that effect and uh it sparks some jealousy from Cordelia. She's
Mm.
like, "What is it with you and Slayers?" The thing is
Mhm.
how many
Xander's
times did
into
she?
every
Yeah,
hot girl that comes on the
Mm.
show. He's
Yeah,
just
when
always into
Mhm.
Sam
girls.
also said that's how he treats women, like I didn't know that. That's new,
Yeah.
that's interesting, new information.
Yeah, yeah. He's very, and I just keep going back to the fact that I'm not trying to defend him here.
Yeah.
He's a teenage boy.
Yeah,
He's a
that's a
teenage
good
boy
point.
in the 90s. I was a
Yeah.
teenage boy in the 80s, and I didn't sexualize every woman that I saw, but there was definitely some moments of if a hot woman barely looked at me that there would be some interest. So I'm, you
Yeah.
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I can't begrudge him being attracted to and wanting attention from the women on the show. My issue comes when he acts possessive of them
Mhm.
mhm.
and and gets like angry that they have the nerve to like be interested in some other guy. Like and the way that he gets mixed up with Willow and ends up cheating on Cordelia, I think is purely because he's like, "No, she's my backup girlfriend and now she's with Oz and I want to,
Y-
now I'm attracted to her
Mm,
because she's with someone else."
Right.
It's
Petty
it's
bullshit.
gross.
Yeah.
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 And sometimes he says really gross things to Buffy
Mm.
Hmm.
and it's like, Come on, Xander, she's your friend. Like, don't.
Mm.
Like, I understand she's beautiful. We all get it, but like, ew."
Yeah. Yeah.
In this episode, he doesn't do any of that
Mm.
stuff.
Yeah.
He's not
Yeah.
gross in this episode at all, and it's a relief. It's like, "Oh, finally we can like
And
Xander."
it's good. And even though, he grows, he has an arc in the series, um, over the next, 5 seasons, right? 4 or 5 seasons. It goes season 8. He's going to have some growth, but he still falls back every now and then on that kind of bad side of
Douchiness.
him. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Every now and then.
He never gets
We were
over
talking.
his obsession with Buffy, really.
No, not really. Even when he's with Anya later, later seasons, he's going to be with Anya, um, and even when he's with her, he's not really with her. It's a lot of times it's she initiates the sex, or he.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's and there's the you were talking about the replacement. Is that the one where he splits
Yeah.
in half and there's two of him? And yeah, that's that. There's a moment at the end of that where Anya kind of treats him that way because she's like, do we really have to put them together? Could we have a
Yeah.
it sounds like she wants to have a three-way with
Oh, sounds like
the two
she's
Xanders.
pretty
No, it
explicit
is.
about it. She's like, "I could have sex with the both of them, and then we could put them back together in the morning."
Then put them back together. Yeah, yeah. Um, that's what's and again, it's alluded to later, but we already talked about the virginity thing. So,
Yeah, yeah.
trying to think what else. What else? Spoilery is.
I thought it was interesting that Jason was describing Willow, and there's nothing in this episode to let you know that Willow has a dark side, and we've seen some inklings of it, and she's kind of power hungry, and
Hmm.
she pursues the witchcraft in a way because she's always been this like picked on nerd, and
Hmm.
it's a way for her to feel empowered, but it
Mhm.
doesn't always have good consequences.
That's interesting. I like
Uh,
it.
Yeah.
she's a really fun villain when she starts to get bad,
Mm.
and yeah,
That's the other thing that's spoiler. It's not until season 5 that we get that moment when we really find out that Xander is an integral member of the team. There's this whole. It's one of my favorite
oh,
speeches by
Checkpoint,
Buffy.
oh,
Yeah,
my favorite
in
episode.
Checkpoint. Yeah, it's one of my favorite episodes because that moment at the end when she's talking to Quentin Travers and Quentin's like, "Well, the boy, he doesn't have any superpowers," and she's like, "The boy has had more field time than all of you put together, and he's part of the unit.
Yeah.
And up in the rafters, Willow's like, "That's Riley speak," or
Yeah. And
just
Xander's like, I'm
and
part of the unit. Like he's
yeah, he feels very proud. And even though we've seen it before, like when he's going to be an integral member of the team when they attack at the end of this season.
Yeah.
And then at the end of season 5, he's going to have another moment where he's, the glorified bricklayer picks up a spear and he knocks out the god Glory, or the demigod Glory. So it's he's going to have his moments to shine, to see that he is a member of the team and he does have some skills.
And then he has some wisdom that he's gained from having this role as well. In season 7, he has that amazing conversation with Dawn about not being special and how it feels to not be special when you're around the Slayer and a witch and everything all the time. And you realize that he has been thinking about it all this time and sort of learning from that and growing from it. It's a pretty cool moment. But yeah, that's 4 seasons from
I
now.
look forward to seeing. Yeah, I look forward to seeing, because there's some things that I forget because I haven't watched the later seasons as many times as the earlier. It's kind of like we talked about this about Lost. If you watched Lost, one of the things that I did every time a new season came out, I went back and watched the previous seasons before the new season came out. So by the time I got to season 5 of Lost, I'd seen like season 1 6 times.
And I hated the ending, so after that, I never watched Lost again.
Wow.
So I've never evened out my viewing or anything. I just was like, nope.
I
give
highly
up.
recommend, if you're willing to do it, I highly recommend going back to the beginning of the Revisited podcast where they covered Lost.
Yeah. One of these days.
They turned me around on the finale of that show. That's a totally different, but they turned me around on the finale.
I was on that episode.
They really did. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
They turned me around because I was very disappointed with the ending as well. But yeah. This show has a really good ending.
I'd say what I think, but you can just listen to that episode.
Exactly.
Yeah. We don't want to spoil it. Yeah. Oh wait, we're in spoilers.
Yeah. This is Buffy spoilers.
Not Lost.
This is Buffy spoilers.
Are there any other big things that we should talk about? I don't think so.
Just like we talked about the fact that this is another apocalypse that is going to get this apocalypse is going to get mentioned in the future as being a prior apocalypse.
That's a Riley line, I think. I suddenly need to know the plural of apocalypse.
Yeah, and they talk about the Hellmouth. We're gonna have other moments when the Hellmouth opens and they have to go back to the school. So it's interesting that that's where the Hellmouth is under the library.
Yeah.
The opening to the Hellmouth.
The high school is built on a Hellmouth is a fun metaphor for what it feels like to go to high school, because you're just constantly absorbing negative energy from everything all the time.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else off the top of my head that there's really, I mean, it sets up a few things, but we've talked about what it sets up. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, then that's the complete end of our show. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And until next time, I'm Penny.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Steve.
Keep slaying.